Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. This is the 70th year since the end of World War II. Today's guests are two members of the generation that have been called the greatest generation. To my far left is Lindy Palin. Believe it or not, he's actually 93 years old. And the youngster of the crew, Joe Queenan, the mayor of Derby Line. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
Now tell me,
Thanks, God.
I was at the Fountain of Youth in St. Augustine a few weeks ago, and I drank some of that water, and it didn't do anything for me. Lindy? What's your secret? Look at that head of hair.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
I have always attributed it to good genes, a good wife, and a little good scotch. Not necessarily in that order.
Well, you know what? Is you and Father Davenant have something in common, then, because he also believes in having a little scotch. So maybe I ought to start dipping into scotch and leave the beer alone. What about you, Joe?
Well, I'm like Lindy. Age never bothered me. Birthday parties came and birthday parties went, but I also say that I married a wonderful woman, and I think that she had much to do with my staying aboard as I am right now and getting to this point. And I enjoy life. I enjoy people. I don't worry about, like when the fellow walked up when I had that motorcycle ride, I was 89 years old, and he said, "You realize you were 89? I said, "Yeah, but I don't know why you're worried. I'm not." So that's about it. It's just keep going. Don't worry about things.
Well, now
Keep busy.
Yeah, because don't you have to wake up looking forward to something? That's what a lot of people have told me, that you have to, if it is not work, you have to look, because I know you still play golf, Lindy, and then you're going to play again this year, Joe, and you're what, 91?
91, yeah.
So, and you play golf, both of you do.
And bowl.
Bowl? With the big balls or the little balls?
The big ones.
Right. Okay, so this is, it's hard to imagine 70 years was the end of World War II. And I remember when I first started collecting World War II veterans to either speak in the high school or we held events, there was a lot of you. One time we filled the Elks full of World War II veterans. Now, do you think we could actually fill the Elks with Orleans County World War II veterans? I probably don't think so.
No.
No, I don't. I think it would be difficult for the crowd we had at that time. And Lindy probably knows more too, but there's how many are going now, and how many are left from World War II?
Yeah, because I know we were talking about it, is you pick up the paper. I know there was a while this winter, it's just like that, you guys were clicking right off.
Yeah, though it seemed like every day you picked it up, somebody knew it was gone that you knew was World War II. They were heading out, and that was I kept saying, well, wait a minute,
I just finished reading the Free Press.
Right.
And among the obituaries was Bruce Cram.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Cram was in the the Air National Guard with me back in 48, 49.
Right.
And he was a World War II vet, then he was called up in Korea, and he just passed away. He was 93.
93.
Right.
Yeah.
And, well, it's just like, it was Ken Jeunesse recently, as Ken was in during World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and he used to joke that he was just a little too young for the Civil War, and he was still trying.
Sounds like Ken.
Yeah, he was still trying to get in to serve in Iraq and Afghanistan, but they were a bit, doubtful whether he could.
That was too bad. After they had that nice article about him and Ruby, too.
Right.
And then right after that, he passed on.
Right.
So.
Okay, a little bit about yourself. I know you've been on the show before, but for new people, is Lindy, you served in the 8th Air Force. How did that all come about? Because you could have, from hearing your story in the past, you could have actually avoided the military just because of a little snafu that you helped clear up.
Yeah, that was sort of interesting. When, after Pearl Harbor and all of us were ready to enlist, I had always been very much interested in aviation, and never really thought that I would ever get to fly, but I just loved reading about stuff. So I decided I would try to get into the aviation cadet program. I did get accepted. I was living in Hartford, Connecticut, and I enlisted down there. And at the time, they were giving credit to the states for enlistments, and I wanted mine to be credited to Vermont. So they said, well, that's fine. We'll transfer your records to Fort Ethan Allen. So they said, well, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 months before your call because there's a big backlog getting into the training program. So I waited the 2 or 3 months, and nothing happened. And a little more time went by, and I started getting kind of curious what's going on. So I called, made contact with Fort Ethan Allen. They never heard of me. So, okay, I'll call the recruiting office in Hartford, Connecticut. Oh, we sent all your records up to Fort Ethan Allen. And, of course, all of this is taking some time. And eventually, I had to go down to Fort Ethan Allen because they, you don't exist as far as we're concerned. So when I went down there, then they started digging around, and they found that my records had been misfiled, and they probably never would have found them. But anyway, after 10 months, I got into the service.
Right. Now, you were an only child too? Could that have exempted you, or not?
Probably if I had come home and worked on my father's farm, right. Yes.
Now, how come? Where were you when you heard that Pearl Harbor was bombed?
I was sitting at the airport in Hartford, Connecticut.
And what was your
watching
reaction?
The airplanes come in and out.
And what was your reaction?
Well, I think shock first, hard to believe, and then anger.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
because it became evident that they betrayed us
right.
badly. They pretended that they were seeking peace, and all the time they were preparing for a surprise attack.
Right. So, do you still have Roosevelt's speech etched in your mind?
The snippets of it.
Right.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in the American island of Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleague delivered to our Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. Japan has therefore undertaken a surprise offensive extending throughout the Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph So help us God.
And just for the viewers, it's interesting where you actually took your first flight. It was at this region's airport, which was one of the first airports, and it wasn't in Coventry; it was in Derby.
Right.
And that's always interesting. People find that it's interesting that we once had a fairly sizable airport in Derby, out on Route 111, in back of what is now
That's right.
the junior high. Okay, Joe. What was your path to the military?
Well, it's actually, as Lindy said, when Pearl Harbor was hit, I was on the main street down by the old Royal Cafe, the restaurant there, and everybody was talking about it, and I'm saying, what's this? I mean, we're being attacked, our country, which I never thought would happen or see. So then I headed down to Boston to join a gang that I would have graduated with in high school down there. They wanted me to come down. And I left my good wife, Bev, as you know, we knew each other. And so I got down to Boston, and for a month or so I met with some of the friends that I used to know. And then I headed in and joined the Marine Corps. I figured it was a good time. A couple of buddies had gone in, and one really had already been nailed at Guadalcanal, and I was early, so when I went in, that's what I did. I felt that.
So Joe, at that time, you didn't have television, and did you have kind of limited knowledge of the world? Because
Yes.
your world, I know you were born in Massachusetts, but then you came up here as a young man, but did your world really revolve just around a little region at the time that you ended up headed out to war?
Everything was right here from where I was born and brought up in Mass to where I came to Vermont, and when I went back. And as far as outside, I never worried about what was going on, I guess, at that age. And then I began to think a lot when that happened. It just...
So when you were a young man, if somebody had asked you, where's Bougainville, which was your first battle, if you'd been in high school and somebody said, where's Bougainville, would you have been able to answer that?
No, I would not. I certainly wouldn't have. I didn't hardly, there's so many places you didn't realize of anything. Bougainville, I might have known Guam a little, something possibly, but it's
Right.
I just never was, like a lot of people, didn't know outside their local.
And some people, they love to go to the tropics for,
Yeah.
like to Florida and that. But I know you've talked to me a lot about Bougainville. Is that a place you want to, in its tropics, would you want to go hang out there anymore?
No, I'm afraid I wouldn't.
Now, what was it like?
If you didn't like, lousy, filthy terrain and mud and water up halfway to your knees. As a matter of fact, I was looking at a book that I have at home, and it had a picture of Don
Bushman.
Don Bushman. He gave me a magazine he gets from the Americal Division, the Army, and it shows a picture of Bougainville, which he was there at the same time. We never knew it till how many years afterwards, but it shows one of the lousy walking through the stuff halfway up to your knees, and it was just filthy. Some of the islands were a little bit open, but this was grubby.
And Linda, you piloted B-17s,
Right.
and how many crew members was that?
9-man crew.
We've talked about your story a few times, and it's amazing. Like, when you went off on a bombing mission, you didn't just take off and go. I think you said you had to circle England, just as everybody had a particular spot.
We circled England, probably an hour and a half before we even left the coast.
Right.
First of all, it took a long time to climb to 25,000 feet. And second of all, we were, there might be anywhere from 500 to 700, 800 bombers on a mission. And getting all of those bombers in the right position and the combat line going in was a pretty complicated procedure. So our missions would run anything like 6 to 8 hours, but probably at least 2 hours of that was circling over England before we even left the coast.
So what was here you are, you were a farm boy?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
18 years.
Did you have a clue what you were? Did you really? Because I know you're well read. You liked Lindbergh and everything. So you knew there was a world out there. But do you think you really had the full scope of what you were getting yourself into?
Probably not. My world really was just up here in the Northeast Kingdom until I went to Hartford, Connecticut, expanded my horizons a little bit, but probably didn't sense fully what we were getting into.
So when you're so you get over to England and you're stationed there, and the day that you head out your first time, what's going through your head? You know that this is for real. You are headed out.
Fear and trepidation.
There you go.
Like was
They treated us in one way well. They kind of broke us in gently. You flew your first mission as a co-pilot with an experienced crew. As a matter of fact, I think I flew my first 2 missions as a co-pilot with an experienced crew. And then after those first 2, then it was my crew.
You know, one of Joe's buddies, Eddie Pronto of Derby, he was at Omaha Beach at H hour on D-Day, and he will say it's really funny though that when you're a young guy like you guys were, he said at that moment sometimes you're just overcome by almost a sense of excitement, and sometimes the fear doesn't kick into you later. Did you ever feel a lot more fear after the bomb and run?
You know, I don't really recall having that experience. One of the things about being the pilot was that since we flew in formation, and the position that I flew in the formation, once we were in that formation, I had to fly the whole mission. My co-pilot couldn't see the plane that I was flying off.
Right.
So the whole theory of the way we could best protect ourselves was fly as tight a formation as possible. And so when you're doing that, you're absolutely 100% concentrating on that guy that you're flying next to and making sure you're keeping that position.
Right, and I know also when anti-aircraft guns began, you can't just decide to move positions. Didn't you just have to keep focused, and even when then try to dodge a little bit if there's an airplane crashing, and
pretty much we had to maintain position. There was no such thing as evasive action.
Right.
Particularly on that minute and a half, which they called the bomb run. You get to what was called the initial point, and when you get to the initial point, you turn the aircraft over to the bombardier, essentially.
Right.
And the bomb site controls the automatic pilot in the plane, and he's zeroing in on the target. So it's straight and level and no deviation.
Right.
And whatever comes up at you, it's, you know.
And you were hit just about every time.
Most missions we would have at least some damage, yeah.
And then there was that one time I know you talked about when you really got hit, and just about everything that couldn't be, that wasn't tied down or was going out because you were limping. You were trying to get over U.S. occupied.
Yeah, we were trying to get back to occupied Belgium or France.
Right.
We had 2 engines shot out, and we were pretty deep in Germany when it happened. So in order to keep the thing flying, we jettisoned all the guns and ammunition and everything that was loose. We dumped out of the aircraft.
Okay, Joe, you had a different view of the war. And now I know Lindy was over in the European theater. You were in the Pacific. But when you looked up into the sky and you saw some of these guys overhead, did you say, "Boy, I wished I was them," versus the guys slogging through the mud, or were you happy where you were compared to being up there?
I was okay with where I was, but I had a lot of respect for these people up there.
Right.
Because I might be able to dig down a little bit more, but if something happens up there and they have no control and they're coming down, it's and as I say, I always did. I certainly did, believe me.
Joe's always been very kind to me.
And I know the last time.
When you see Lindy was talking about the formations and so forth, and you stayed right there now. I watched a lot of it, and they don't vision this way. They stay right there till such time, and then you have to break when you get like you did. You had to move out.
We never broke formation until we got over the English Channel.
That's right.
Yeah. I've been told by foot soldiers and even by the enemy at the time. I've interviewed most of the German soldiers who've lived here, but even the American soldiers said that if you saw anybody unload, even the Americans, and it looked like the bombs were coming right down on you, that you were actually safe if it looked like they were coming at you, because the momentum would actually carry them away. They said it's when you had to, because let's be real, is we hear about friendly fire accidents today, which let's be real, World War II, you had far more of them because of your technology. So I guess even, I don't know if you guys kept an eye on even your friendly boys up there or not when they were going over.
Oh yes, when they were around, we felt pretty damn good. I'll tell you, it was when that other guy was up there and he was out that way. Excuse my pointing, but when he was there, that's when you worried. When he was there, you kind of said, "Well, we're okay for this time."
Right. Okay, so what was your experience? You ended up he went to England. Where was your base of operation out of originally?
Well, actually, when I left Paris Island, went to Camp Lejeune,
Right.
and when we operated in June, Lejeune pulled out of there by troop train and went west to San Diego, then went overseas, and we actually based, which was beautiful, American Samoa. And I remember saying to a friend of mine, a good buddy out of boot camp from Amesbury, Mass, Gene Pierce, I said, Skyhead, and Skyhead was because when he got his butch haircut at camp, he had more scars than you could shake a stick at, so he got named Skyhead. And I said, we got it made here, look at this island. And all of a sudden I hear somebody say, "Don't count your chickens before the hatch." And he was right. But it was one step after another, and we started from there, and then we ended up in New Zealand getting the equipment ready, the guns ready, and then we took off. And we went in to the canal. We replaced what they called then the 3rd Defense Battalion. It ended up being the 3rd Provisional then. And there was still a few boys upstairs, those guys dropping them down, but very little. And then we got ready and got everything lined up to go to Bougainville. That was our embarkation, or whatever you want to call
Now,
it.
where is Bougainville?
Well, that's a good question. 'Cause really, you'd have to look at the map. I don't have word. I know we went to Bougainville, and that was it.
Right, and how were you greeted there? Did you have?
It wasn't good. But we hit a little island. I almost want to say it's almost no bigger than the park in Derby Line or Gardner Park. But we had to go across the bay, and that was the big point. We had to go across the bay because we took the island. That's where we hit there. It was all coral, and of course we spent a couple of nights there, and we getting bombed. You couldn't dig in the coral, So when we got across the mainland, and that's when all hell broke loose. And then a couple of days later, we were pounding away, and the jungle was as thick could be, and the grub and all of a sudden we could hear this little chug, 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 and guess what? It was a CB getting ready to start making room for an airstrip, and we hadn't hardly got our butts beyond the place. And so I always had a lot of respect for the Seabees.
Right.
I certainly did.
No, Lindy, when you, I don't know, could you actually see what was going, like, and again, you were in different theaters, but when you're looking down from how many feet were you flying at?
Usually around 22, 25, somewhere in there.
1,000?
Yeah.
Right. So what are you seeing when you're looking down on a clear day?
Well, from that height, by the naked eye, obviously, you could make out rail lines, you could make out lakes, rivers. A city obviously showed up very well. But as far as actually seeing the target while we were bombing or before we bombed, I really didn't, because I was watching that guy.
Right. So if you had time to think about it, if you were sitting up there and you were thinking about Joe or people like him over in European theater, would you have been saying, thank God I'm up here and not down here? Or would you have rather been down slogging your way across the countryside?
No, not really.
And you knew how many flights because you knew when your day was coming. How many flights did you?
35, and we knew. When I first went over there, it was 25, and I was about halfway through my tour, and the German Air Force was beginning to get a lot weaker, so they increased our tour to 35.
Right. And the thing is at the end of a flight, you went home. You were not home, but you went back to base, and you had kind of like a normal life.
Well, as soon as you finished your tour, actually, I finished my crew up 3 missions before I finished, because they put me in as the squadron operations officer, and then I finished my last 3 missions as a acting command pilot in charge of a group. So my crew finished in December, and I actually finished in March, and by April I was on a boat coming home.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, if you took a flight over, say, Berlin, once you came back and landed, what did you do then? Was it just?
When we landed, we had to go immediately to a debriefing.
Right.
And each position on the aircraft was briefed separately. In other words, the pilots and co-pilots were debriefed by one officer, the navigator by another one, the bombardier by another, and the gunners by still another. And then I suppose they tried to piece all those things together to get a complete picture of the mission. And right after debriefing, if you wanted, you could have a shot.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Of liquor.
So what about you, Joe? Did your day never, when you were out there, it never really came to an end until somebody stopped shooting at you?
That was it. It was still moving until they said, we're getting out of here, we're going back. It's been now turned over to, like Bougainville was turned over to, I think, the Australians or whatever. See, everybody says, well, we took. You never take. You go in and you clear an island, you just stabilize it, and then you move on.
Right. So then you went to Okinawa. Now, what was the time span?
The funny part of that I always laugh at, it was Easter Sunday. It was April 1st, which is what? April Fool's Day, right?
Yes.
And it was on a Sunday, April, in 1945. And I always think about the April Fool's part, because when we landed, there was nothing. Just plain nothing. Just what civilians you ran into. We couldn't find but maybe 4 or 5 Japs here or there, but we're waiting to see where is the big explosion. What's going to happen? And I have a division book that shows you, I think I showed you the plane that landed on Yontan airstrip there. On the airstrip, that a Japanese airplane that was circling around, came down and got out, and when he did get out, I guess he reached for that sidearm because he realized he was in the wrong place. The airport had been taken, So
did you think that intelligence had was faulty, that there really wasn't any more troops there? Or did you know they
No,
were there?
when we had, I think it was approximately 3, maybe 4 days. We kept moving. We were moving so fast, supplies couldn't stay with us. And finally, what it was, as we got the word, the skipper was gone all day. We knew something was in the wind. So when he came back, he said, we mount up first thing in the morning. We're heading south. Well, supposedly they had pulled another fake invasion down around Naha, and they pulled most of their strength right out of the north to get down there and reinforce what they already had. And that's why we were running into very few up there. Now and then a pocket of 10, maybe 12 or something, but that was it. And I think they might have been stragglers. Some of them, poor, they didn't look like they knew what gender was up, to be honest with you. And then when we went south, we landed at a place called Marcianado Airstrip, and from there on it was hell till the end. So, excuse my language, but it was. And I got to tell a story here, and it's a very true story. There was a boy named Eddie Ruitz, R-U-I-T-Z, that went to high school with me in Woburn, Mass. And we had been up to Naha, and we're coming back to the airport to regroup. And Eddie was going up, which I didn't know, but we were on the side of the road, took our helmets off to get a little air, and I heard somebody holler, "Scaldi." And when I heard Scaldi over across the road on that group going north, somebody had to come from Woburn, Mass, because the only people that knew about Scaldi Baldy was people down at Woburn, because I, as a kid, got my head all cleaned right down, shaved just about. I wasn't going to sweat that summer. And the old Eastern Mass car barns were right opposite my house, pretty, maybe quarter of a mile less. And I used to go over there and help the man. I'd hold the hose while he'd brush down the streetcars and the buses. And I forgot to wear a hat. And when I got through with that afternoon, my eyes, I looked just like Peeps, and I just wonder I didn't die. Johnny can tell you, he's heard my cousin tell about it. And it's just that's that guy Scaldi, and I went over there, and it was this Eddie Ruitz. So now we shake hands and hug each other and wish well. And he goes on. I come back down to get a rest, my group rather, or us. And everything goes along, and we go back up in the area, and nothing more. But when I got back to the canal, and Guam, we got back to Guam, and the mail caught up to us. And I get a letter from my cousins at home, and he got killed up there. Right after that, and I never forgot that. He got a Silver Star. I know that because I have his record at home. But that was, to me, somebody hollering Scaldi out and put in there Naha.
I know during the Korean War, I think it was one of the Ingalls from Irisburg. He's still around. He was telling me the story. He was at a checkpoint. I'm not sure which one, but I think he was at a checkpoint, and he looked at somebody, and it was my uncle who they were friends. So you ended up running into people. But you talked about your friend getting killed, but I know you even did not like killing the enemy because you have a flag, and a lot of people make war look kind of romantic. Is there anything romantic about war?
No.
No. There never was and never will be. And it's a case, as Lindy can tell you, with his up there and so forth. And you talk about the flag. Yes, I got the flag. But the point is that you're there, you're representing your country, he's representing his country. You have to come out on top. And that's the way you don't like to,
I knew a Luftwaffe pilot, Albert Vart, who lived in Troy, and he was a true gentleman. He was actually, he bombed Russia, and he was telling me when he was shot down, he knows he was shot down by one of their own kids, because at that time, near the end of the war, the Germans were, he was Estonian, but he flew for the Luftwaffe. he said, I know I was shot down by one of my own people, because at that time the Germans were using kids to man the anti-aircraft, and he had 2 scars right across his legs where when he had to bail out of his Volker-Wolf, and it was in a death spiral, and he bailed out, and his legs were shattered on the prop or the tail, and he had to land on two broken legs. But he had a great respect for you guys. Just even though you were enemies, they respected you.
If you want to get a good perspective on that, there's a great book called A Higher Call.
Right.
And it's about an incident that happened. B-17 was so badly shot up that they were in big trouble. And a German fighter pilot came upon them, and he looked it over, and he could see that a couple of the crew members were already killed. The plane was totally shot up, and he decided they're never going to make it, and I am not going to shoot these guys down. So he just went back to his base, and he never told anybody, because if he told anybody, he would have been court-martialed and probably shot. Years later, those 2 pilots made contact and became friends.
Well, and there's the other story, and he's a guy that we both know is Francis Angier.
Right.
He was a B-17 pilot too, correct?
Yeah, yes.
And he lived in Newport for a number of years. He was shot down, and he was one of the I guess he was the survivors. He was trying to get him out when the airplane blew up, and he said that it was about treetop height before his parachute went, because he came to, and he was busted all up. And as you probably were told, is you're actually safer being captured by the military versus the villagers and everything. Well, he said he got himself a good whooping by the locals.
Yeah.
And he said that the one guy who didn't make it, well, there was a number of them, but one of them ended up being killed. He refused to take off his Star of David ring, and that cost him his life.
Yeah.
But he said that when he was in the camp, and I believe it was in the same camp as the Great Escape. It was after the Great Escape. And when Hitler ordered near the end of the war, Hitler had ordered that the POWs be exterminated. And he said that it was the Luftwaffe who saved their lives, because he said in a weird way, they were like brothers. They weren't going to just allow them just to be exterminated, and the Luftwaffe took over the camp and held off the Wehrmacht.
That's true.
And so on the other hand, on the Japanese theater, did you have as much as that goodwill? Because I've heard so much about the Japanese and their willingness to die no matter what.
That is very true from what I witnessed and went through. But they were dying for the emperor. It made no difference whatsoever. For them to get shot, in many cases, and I think anybody that went out there in the Pacific would tell you the same thing, that if they got shot by you and got killed, to them it was glory.
Right.
Whereas to me, it was keep my butt safe as much as I can and get out of here.
Right.
You know?
Well,
that's just about the way to put it.
Well,
really.
that's the other thing. You see war movies, and they make it sound like you set out to be a hero or you're doing it for your country. But I've had a number of people, including the guy that at least you and I knew, and you probably did too, Roland Willie.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Well, he was a Derby line. Roland Willie was a highly decorated combat soldier. He actually took over for Andy Pepin's brother when he was killed.
Oh, okay.
And he took over, and he was highly decorated because of particularly one thing. They were pinned down by Japanese forces, and he he realized that they were going to be killed. They had a pillbox, and then all of a sudden American tanks came in, two, he said, little ones. I don't know if they had a particular name, these small tanks, and all of a sudden they veered away. And it's like, wait a minute here, they're supposed to be helping us. So Roland was commanding his men, and he says, cover me, he says, and he ran through a hail of fire, jumped on the tank, and pounded on it. And well, they had lost radio service and contact, and they then blew out the pillbox and saved all these guys. Well, Roland said, I was hailed as this hero. He said, when I did that, he said, I wasn't doing it to be a hero. I wasn't doing it for attention. He says, I knew I was going to die. Mm-hmm. And he says, the fact of the matter is, it's like Ken Scott, who was also an officer, including at the Battle of the Bulge, he kind of scoffed at the idea that he was decorated because of his action of saving his men at the Battle of the Bulge. He said, because, I wanted to save their butts, but I wanted to save mine too. and so you hear, these people, there's a lot of humble people out there who they were doing what they had to do.
Automatic.
Yeah.
Well, this is automatic when Lindy can tell you. Go ahead.
I'd like to just comment on Okinawa, because I just happened to stumble on it the other night. Oliver North's World War II stories,
right? And
it was about Okinawa. And when you landed, there was no opposition, and they told about that, and then the fact that, of course, they were all holed up in caves, and then it became a really bloody, awful mess.
Wasn't it the bloodiest battle of the war? I believe.
I don't know. All I know it was.
It had to be.
It was. It had to be, as Lindy said.
It had to be.
Because I'll tell you, there was the battle of up through Nahar and Shuri were vicious, and they had what they called a Sugarloaf Hill, and that was one of them with the caves and all the outlets and everything. But they had a try in there. They had Sugarloaf Hill in the middle, and they had a half moon, they called it here. I forget for sure now just what, I should never forget it probably, but those three were there, and we came into that crossfire is what was happening. And it just to get Shuri was, and Nahar itself, that's where, as I say.
And you said they'd pop up in back of you because there was the caves.
They had the caves. Like in Sugarloaf, they'd come through this side, you'd be working at them here, and they'd go back and come up the top side. And they had all kinds of outlets in there. And of course, the thing was, you didn't step in front of a cave and you didn't go in, so you had to kind of blow them. And I know there was another fellow friend of mine, and not a friend, but he was a member of my outfit. You remember Rod Carney on what's his name show there?
Yeah.
Jackie Gleason.
Yeah.
The Honeysuckle guy.
Oh yeah, sure. Art Carney. Yeah.
This was almost a twin. And he was just like him. And we had moved from one position to another, and we went into a small cave, and I don't know why he stepped, like I'm sitting in front of that camera. Why did he ever do it? He got it, and that was what, but it was, as Lindy was saying, it was a bloody gulch.
Well, because it's like David Reed said. David Reed lives in Craftsbury. I believe he's still around. He's a Marine too.
Oh yeah.
And he said sometimes he was on Iwo Jima, a horrible bloody battle, and he said he was right in the thick of it with his gun crew, but they never ever got hit, and you just never knew.
Well, it's like I told you and Benny that. I think the worst thing that happened to me really was close, but no cigar. But malaria, yes. Malaria got the cigar,
Yeah, because you still have a little after effects of malaria.
Yeah, probably. But as I said, Frank Vermonti was the one that helped me a lot after I got home, I'll tell you.
Well, I'm sure Joe would agree with me that there's a tremendous amount of luck involved that he and I are sitting here. I was really strongly reminded of that very recently. I get a newsletter that's published by my old bomb group, and a grandson of one of the pilots that was in my squadron had an article in the newsletter recently, and he was talking about his grandfather being shot down on a mission over Berlin, and another crew. Unfortunately, they all survived. They became prisoners of war. Another crew on that same mission was shot up badly. They tried to make it back to England. They had to ditch in the channel, and all the crew got out except the pilot and co-pilot. He put a diagram of them. He's done a lot of research. He put a diagram of the formation that day, and I was flying element lead, and his grandfather was flying on my left wing. The guy who never made it over the channel was right behind me and under me.
Yeah.
You know, luck, right?
Yeah. That's like I said when I got the flag. The guy next to me got nailed in the cross here, and I didn't get it. He missed me. Why? Yeah.
Right.
And so many times that happened. Why?
Well, I know in the past, I think you were on here with when we had a panel of the 3 veterans. We had you as World War II, then we had John Wilson, the president of the city council for Vietnam, who was a combat soldier. Then we had Dana LaPlante of, I believe, of Derby, who was in Iraq or Afghanistan, and it was just kind of interesting the way you guys talked about, whether it was technology and that, but particularly you and John. John was mortified when he killed his first person, because you don't see that on movies. It's all glory, and every veteran that I've talked to who actually took people's lives, it isn't something they're proud of. It's what they had to do.
It's what's the right word? The instinct of the moment, and you're there. That's the reason you're there. And it's not that you came over there to kill that guy. You're doing your duty. That he's going to get you, or you're going to get him.
Right. Okay, we're 70 years later, and it obviously helped shape your lives. Because you are called the greatest generation. Well, first of all, how do you feel about that title, the greatest generation?
I don't know if we're the greatest generation or not. Sometimes I think we are.
I like to agree with you, Lindy. I really do, because we got tackled at something that we had some faith, as you and your father and I, or whoever, that the Japanese were trying to work with our country. They were our friends, and then we had to go, and we just had to pick up and go. There was no thinking. There was no prior deal on it, and we had local people over there when that Pearl Harbor was bombed. You take the guys from Newport here and the guys from North Troy that were all over there, and now and we went and we did a job, and I think that.
Do you think we have this?
I was just going to say, I'm very proud of what our generation did.
Right.
But I also know that there's a lot of young people today doing the same thing.
That's right.
And they're all volunteers.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody told them they had to go.
Right.
They volunteered.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is you lost hundreds and sometimes thousands of people in a battle. Now, if somebody in the military dies in Iraq or Afghanistan, if you have one or handful of people die, it's on the news. Which I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but do you think the United States really has the stomach to lose? Do you think the United States has the stomach to lose hundreds and hundreds of people in one battle, even for the right cause?
It's a tough one, but no, I just wish there was. I suppose it never would be, and it never will be, that we didn't have conflicts like this, where we couldn't all, as a country, world, get together. And it's, you read. I like to go back to when Lindy was in Europe, and I was on the other side of the water. But I like to think in terms of World War II, talking about generations and so forth. my theory of it is this, that you had Germany, who had a pretty good strong arm going for them over there, and they had Russia as an ally, and then they decided to get hungry and hit Russia, which was a mistake. And when it ended up, when you stop and think about it, and you read history and see history, there was a kind of a tripod. You had Germany, Russia, and Japan. And if we hadn't won World War II, where would this country be? What country would it be?
Yeah.
And I remember getting off, coming home on the train again. I think getting off and out, for the hell, down in Bainbridge, Maryland. And we were talking, and I said, well, you know, that should be the end of all wars. And I think probably it could have been a year or two after that. I'm reading either U.S. News or one of them, and we're talking about wars. And this writer, I don't remember the name, of course, but he was saying that we will be occupied with conflicts for the rest of our day. And look at it.
Do you, Lindy? Do you worry about our future now with all that's going on? You know, in the world with ISIS and such.
I certainly do.
Oh yeah.
I think that the present administration is ignoring history.
I know one of my favorite guests on my radio show is a concentration camp survivor of Auschwitz. And she was one of Dr. Mangler's she was experimented on because she was a twin. And she has a unique perspective. And she said in her lifetime, she has never seen a group that is more of a danger. She said, at least with the Nazis, she said, the one redeeming thing about them, they were so arrogant, they could not take off their uniforms, as in, you know, you knew who the enemy was.
Right.
And she said, and she says this tongue in cheek because she really thinks they were very arrogant people, but because of their arrogance, you always knew who they were.
Right.
They said with this current group, she actually thinks they're actually far, far more dangerous than the Nazis ever thought about being. And part of it is because you don't know who they are.
Yeah. I think she's got a good point.
Right. And she goes back. She brings Americans back to Auschwitz every year.
Mm-hmm.
She brings 100 people because she wants to see what true evil was all about in her generation.
Right.
And she's a frequent guest, and this whole thing really bothers her. What's going on, and she would agree with you, is we're not taking it seriously enough. I don't know what to do, but you know, she will say that it's a big. Okay, 70 years once again, and Joe asked me. He says, "Hey, you know, Scott, why don't you host another gathering of World War II vets? Because my family has done it for several different times. We've done it for Korean War vets, Vietnam, families who lost loved ones in war, and we've done, I think, 3 gathering of World War II veterans. And you know, probably when we did it a few years ago, we probably thought, you know, you guys aren't going to be kicking around that long. Well, it's 70
That would
years.
be gone, Lindy.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
you know what, Drew? Mark my word, I think you're both going to be here in 5 years, and we're going to be talking about hosting the 75th. But we're going to be holding the 70th anniversary recognition of the end of World War II. Now, we're not holding it on the actual date, which I believe is September 2nd.
I'm sorry, yeah.
And we're actually going to hold it on June 6th at 1 o'clock at the Goodrich. And June 6th seems like a good day anyways. It's it's D-Day, the 69th. It was really the day that broke the backs of the Nazis
Right.
in Europe. So we're holding it then. And, you know, there's another good reason to hold it a little early is, you know, there's a lot of, as we talked, there's a lot of you who are leaving us. And, you know, granted, I know you both are going to be here in 5 years. But,
I don't plan to go anyway, you.
Well, there's no guarantee, but I'll tell you what, one of the things on my bucket list is to play golf when I'm 100.
There you go.
And so one of my buddies has already made out the golf cart for July 18th,
Well, at the
2021.
At the rate you're going and snow still being on, you better question whether you're even going to be able to play golf this year. At the rate you're going.
Yeah, that is a question.
So, are you both going to plan to be there on June 6th at the Goodrich?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Right,
yes,
and-
yes.
And we're hoping for a turnout, and this is also for the viewers, either whether you're a World War II veteran or you're not. It's free and open to the public,
Right.
and last time what we did, we had a bit of pomp and circumstance,
Yeah.
but more as importantly was a time for you guys to talk and sometimes commiserate, sometimes to celebrate. I remember somebody brought this big old Nazi flag that they'd captured, and other people brought just memorabilia. And not everybody who served in World War II actually fought, but I think you'll agree, is whether they had an important role.
Right.
They may not saw action. The women veteran who I've interviewed it's so hard to get them to talk about what they did because they feel they did nothing. No, they did. They did things in their own way. They took over positions for the men when they were away, and it's interesting. We've had I've interviewed a number of women veterans here who I can tell you the vast majority of people didn't even know that they'd served in the military.
Yeah, and there's another thing we were talking about with World War II. We, Lindy and myself and all the others, servicemen like us. But what about the people back home that couldn't get 10 gallons of gas, and they
Right.
couldn't get this, they couldn't get that, and they suffered so that we would have
Right. Or
whatever.
And then my father also talks about being a kid, is they would go out and get milkweeds. And you know what they were doing with milkweed pods? It was actually used in life vests.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's what. So they did that as kids.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and you really surprised me on this, is they also had metal drives, and all that flak you threw out. You threw out all that.
Aluminum strips of aluminum foil.
I figured you must have had some machine, and you said that was all just
It's all by hand.
all by hand, and that was to throw off. That was to throw off enemy radar.
Yes.
And I've had more than one soldier tell me over the years. Sometimes you made it look kind of like Christmas, because it was like
A lot
tinsel.
of tinsel.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, the event at the Goodrich is on
That's good.
Saturday, June 6th at 1:00, and again, it's for anybody to attend. And although these two are going to be here in 5 years or 10 years, many of our World War II veterans are leaving us, and there's your generation. I think every generation goes through a lot, but I imagine that neither one of you ever pictured that you were going to be carrying a phone around in your pocket and doing some of the things you're doing. And it's just like you probably even remember the last stages of horse and buggy traffic, don't you?
Yeah, but they had them up there.
Well,
Would have.
I lived on a dirt road about a half a mile off the highway, and as far back as I can remember, we had a motor vehicle, but I can remember in this time of year, mud season,
Yeah.
it was back to the horse and wagon to get to the village.
Every once in a while I laugh because even though I'm 50, sometimes I think I'm older because I've interviewed so many and I think, oh my God, we're such whiners. Grant, there are challenges today that you guys did not experience, but on the other hand, for the most part, we have it pretty well. We have it pretty well made. Nobody. There's really not that many people who go hungry. Back in your day, you had the poor farm. If you didn't want to work, You didn't, you know, you went to the
You
poor
didn't
farm.
want a pile of wood, you didn't get fed sometimes.
Right,
You know what
and
I'm saying?
but you know, today is a pretty good, you know, for the most part.
Oh, yeah.
You know, back in your day, you didn't have issues though, like you know, you didn't have these issues like heroin and such. So I think there are struggles that today's generations do face. But I do think the greatest generation actually fits you well. But you said one thing, Lindy, that there's many people who are doing the exact same thing as you did, or you know, different versions of it. You know, many young people. Well, I have 2 diary entries which I've mentioned quite a bit. There was one that the woman is talking about the lazy young people of today. They don't want to work. That was written in like 1880 in Charleston, Vermont. There was another diary entry I have. I don't know where it was written. The person, I think it was a woman again, diary writer, she's fretting about this generation. They're listless. They're not going to amount to anything. What's this country coming to? She was talking about your generation. She was talking about your generation. And in other words is, you know what, I think we will survive no matter what. You know, every generation just does things a little different. I have great faith in a lot of kids of our this current generation. They're doing things different, but I did things different than, you know, the generation.
You know, you
before
can
me.
almost, Lindy will probably agree with me on this. If things were as they are now in our generation, we'd have probably been in the same situation.
Right.
What would be different, see? So in other words, things have changed and they've gone with the change. And
Right.
my only, I probably shouldn't say it here, but I think I can. I always felt bad the way these people from Vietnam were treated.
Right.
I really do, and because I know that they went, some didn't see to it, and it was true, you know. But I just felt, in many cases,
Right.
when they came home, they weren't treated
Right.
to any kind of recognition.
Yeah, that's how come we hosted that welcome home party decades later, because, you know, they didn't.
Well, I got to tell you another one. When we came back, we got into Newport. Did you belong to the 5220 Club? Did you know what that was?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Every veteran that came back from World War II, they had 52 weeks. They gave them $20 a week in the state. So everybody went in. I think it was Beth Sessions might have been in the unemployment office or one of the offices.
Could be, I don't know.
Where you go, you know, and it was a lot of the states did that, you know. So I went in to get my $20 for Dave Keefe and all the gang. She says, "You can't have it." I said, "What do you mean I can't have it? You're giving it to the veterans." She says, "Yeah, but you enlisted in Massachusetts and not Vermont." I said, "You're kidding me." She said, "No," and that was true. I couldn't get that $20.
Oh, my.
Well, to
No.
make it
Not that it killed me. It wasn't that. It's just that. Okay, fine.
Because weird things did happen too. Is like Paul Moffat of Newport, who's in his 90s now. I mean, he was just brutal combat, and he was blown up. He was, you know, he has to this day he still suffers from the war. And when he came back, the constable showed up at his door to take away his driver's license. Because the constable didn't feel that him being away from war was a good enough reason for him to pay his poll tax.
Oh, boy.
And the thing is the city council quickly rectified that.
Yeah.
But still,
Yeah.
70 years later,
That's right.
he's still.
Yeah.
If you brought it up, it just still grates him that he had gone, sacrificed his mind and body, and came home to that.
right.
So just think of what those poor Vietnam veterans
That's-
are feeling to this day, and that's how come I have worked to give
Yeah.
them a voice as well,
Yeah.
because you know they have felt that
Right.
you know that's a war. We can debate that until the end,
That's right.
but the fact of the matter is you know that isn't
they
what
went
they asked.
and they should have been used properly.
Right. Okay, well,
Dave Reed, if I can add that in,
Yep.
I thought about it. From Craftsbury.
Yep.
Roy Davis's daughter's son, the Sykes boy.
Yep.
Kid went in the Marine Corps, and he was over on Evo, and he was a mechanic on the airplanes, I guess. And he brought back a bag of that sand over there.
Sands of
Black
Iwo Jima.
sand.
Mm.
And because he thought I was there, so he brought it back to me. And that day down at the library, and Dave was there, and I said, Dave, I've got a bag of sand that came from you. Would you like it?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, I'd love it. So I gave it to him, and honest to God, the tears rolled right down his cheek, you know. He said, I should have got some of the way Miss Kababa was getting out of there and everything. And the kid gave it, so he was happy as a lark with that.
Well, hopefully we have more of those stories too on at the event on June 6th at 1 p.m. at the Goodrich.
There you go.
I know a lot of some of the people who were there last time. Yeah, they can't be there now because they're gone.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of them that were up there, like Evelyn's gone.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, thank you both for coming on, and thank you for your service, and thank you for sticking around for 70 years so I can interview you. And I do look forward to interviewing you in 5 years at the 75th anniversary.
He might as well
End of
make
World
up
War
his
II.
mind
Well,
now
let's
that
call
he's
it a
not
day.
going to get rid of us.
Right.
Well, let's call it
We're
a
not going to
date.
let that happen.
Right.
So.
Okay,
That's a date.
thanks for coming on.
Thank you for
And I am now going to go and I'm going to buy myself a bottle of scotch. If that's the secret of aging like the two of you.
That is it.
I'm-
I'm with plenty of that is it.
All right, thank
Yes.
you. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.